Hey, welcome back to noclass, you assholes. For those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Jack. I am your host, and today your teacher. I've got my teaching hat on. I got my favorite mug here.
My favorite people call me Nana.
You should take your education very seriously. And I do. I'm bringing in props to make it feel like a classroom setting. A environment conducive to learning. So, for those of you returning back, you might notice different backdrop, different lighting, whole different vibe. If you're a continuity slut like I am, you probably noticed the lighting last video was horrible. And it changed a lot. The channel's called noclass, you know? What sort of production value were you expecting? I'm just a boy trying his best, you know? That's on you if you came in with the high expectations. I can't do anything about that. So I apologize for the lighting. For the time being, it's just going to have to look like we're south of the border in Breaking Bad. Killed it. And before you berate me for being a film student that doesn't know anything about lighting, I'm a screenwriter, okay? Lighting and screenwriting, very different. They may rhyme, but they are not the same. You think I got this pasty white complexion from going outside and being on sets all the time? No. But that's actually a great segue into what we're talking about today, which is how to write a screenplay from start to finish. This is episode 1 of probably a lot. I'm going to be walking you through the process, holding your hand every step of the way. It's not weird though. It's like a platonic thing. It's like a teacher thing, so don't take it weird. Now, when I sat down to plan out how this video should go, how to sort of map it all out, I realized there are a lot of things that are subjective in this process. So I'm not only going to give you the objective tools that you need, but I'm also going to give you a little bit of insight on my personal process. Don't feel any pressure to do it that way. There are lots of different ways to accomplish it. These are just the tools that I have found have been helpful for me. But I highly recommend that you don't just take my word for it. You go out, you improve upon what I'm saying, and you make it your own. Now, there are some objective things that can help you get this screenplay done. And the number one thing that you need to do is start compartmentalizing a little bit. Because if you just look at the final product of a screenplay, it's gonna scare you off. It's commonly accepted that 1 page of script equals 1 minute of screen time. So, if you're looking to write a full feature-length movie, you're going to end up with a script anywhere from 90 to 120 pages. That's a big yikes. So in order to make that a little bit more manageable for you, we're going to be breaking it down into smaller bite-sized chunks. I think you can boil down the entire screenwriting process into 3 different phases. Before I get into what those phases are, I have to give credit here. I learned this from Hank Boland, who was a teacher at Columbia when I studied there. He made this a sort of a joke during a class, but I really liked it, and it stuck with me. And now it is what I use to structure every single screenplay that I write. But the 3 main phases of any screenplay are bullshit, shit, and then holy shit. The first phase, bullshit, is kind of where you are right now. You have a lot of ideas floating around, maybe a scene, a character, a line of dialogue, but you don't really have anything physical yet. And until you do, it's all just bullshit, baby. So the first phase is all about making the ideas that you have that relate to your screenplay, the conflicts, the characters, getting that all to work before you ever sit down and start writing. Highly recommend that you have some form of Word document, PowerPoint, Google Docs, whatever it is, you have some hub that you can start funneling all your ideas into. You got to make these ideas concrete in order to tweak them and to find out what's working and what isn't. Now, for this series, I'm going to assume that you already have a screenplay idea that you're looking to develop a little more fully. Coming up with ideas is a whole different beast altogether. If you guys want a video on that, I can give you one, but it'll probably just be a lot of me taking really long, hot showers and beating my head against the wall for 2 hours. I don't think anybody wants to see that. Also, I don't want to film myself in the shower, so forget I said that part. I'm not, my mom watches these, so. Now, the second phase, shit, is where you actually sit down and you write the project. And I like the name of this because it's a good reminder that every first draft sucks. Your favorite movie at one point was an absolutely garbage first draft. If you're a perfectionist like I am, one of the hardest parts about the whole screenwriting process is allowing yourself the room to fail. If you want your first draft to be absolute gold, then you're never going to get it done. You just kind of need to get it out there. You need to fail the first time around so that you have a point of reference that you can correct upon in the drafts to come. Writing is essentially throwing shit at a wall and seeing what sticks. And because you gotta allow yourself the room to fail a little bit, I actually recommend starting out with a project that is not your passion project. I feel like most creative types have one project that they want to get done at some point in their lives, and that can be a really daunting place to start. If you pick an idea that you don't have that much stake in, you can experiment a little bit more with it, and you're less tied to it if it were to go terribly, terribly wrong. And the third phase, holy shit, is probably going to be the shortest phase of any of the ones that we talk about in this series. It's really just more of the second phase. When you're throwing shit at a wall, you keep what works and you try and fix what isn't. And if you keep doing that enough, you slowly chisel away at the rock and eventually end up with that naked man statue that everybody loves so much. The one thing I do want to say about this process, I highly recommend that you find somebody that you can send your drafts to. The point of screenwriting or of making movies in general is to find something human that people connect to. And if you're sitting in a room by yourself writing all the time without input from anybody else, it sometimes doesn't relate the way that you would like it to. So, in order to make sure that you're doing that properly, you gotta have an outside perspective to see how it clicks with different people of different backgrounds. So that in mind, we're gonna jump right into the bullshit, baby. We're going for it. Phase 1, bullshit. Now the first step is considering in what medium your story should be told. Movies and television have different goals in the end, so knowing which one your idea adheres most closely to is usually worth thinking about before you actually embark on this journey. For movies, usually specific moments in time, specific journeys work best on screen. This could be a one-time visit to a dinosaur theme park, or the moment when a boy becomes a man in coming-of-age films. Television is a little bit different, because the goal of television is to have multiple seasons. So if you have a concept that is good beyond just a specific moment in time, a lot of times you want to blow that up a little bit and see if you can turn it into a television pilot instead. An example I always use is The Purge. I think The Purge is a really good concept, but whenever you see a movie about it, it just doesn't feel like it does the concept enough justice. If I were the people making The Purge, and I'm not, to be clear, I did not write The Purge, but if I did write The Purge, I think it would work best as an anthology TV series, following a different person during the purge each episode. Now, this isn't always true, because there's different types of television. There's more episodic, which is about sort of being self-contained within the episode, as the name would suggest. And then there's serialized, which builds off the episodes ahead of it, like Breaking Bad or a Mr. Robot. But even with these serialized stories that resemble movies a little bit more than episodic television, they usually have an end date in mind. They know how it's going to end, and they have a set amount of time it takes them to get there. So always be considering whether or not your idea is meant to be a movie or a television series, because there are slight differences, and again, you want to play to your idea's strength. Step 2 is figuring out what the hell your movie's about. What's it about? When you're starting to develop your premise, you can start two main places. You could start with your protagonist, your main character, or you can start with your external plot. Knowing where you should start really comes down to what type of concept your movie is. And there are two main types: high concept and low concept. High concept is something that's very easily communicated. These are usually going to be your plot-heavy action movies. For example, this could be a man tracking down his daughter who has been taken, or men drive car out of plane save world. Low concept, by comparison, is a lot more tricky to describe because it puts its emphasis in characters and in world over the plot. This also isn't to say that because your movie is high concept that it shouldn't have characters that you care about. And if you have a low concept story, you want to have a motivating force that takes you throughout it, or else the audience is going to get bored. So these two concepts are kind of a spectrum, like sexuality or your internet cable provider. Usually if you're a first-time screenwriter, your idea is going to be high concept. So we're going to assume that and move forward with how to make your plot interesting. That takes us to step 3, making your characters suffer. Now, conflict is the key to keeping your audience invested in your movie. Nobody wants to go see a movie where the main character just gets what they want the entire time. If they wanted to see that, they would move to the suburbs. Real life should have obstacles, and your movie should too. Giving your characters obstacles along their journey is what makes the audience root for them and ultimately celebrate with them when they're victorious or cry with them when they aren't. There are three main types of conflict that you can use to keep your story interesting. There's man versus man. This is your typical antagonist versus protagonist, good versus evil. If you think of the Western genre, they're sort of the epitome of this. It is the man in the white hat, the man in the black hat. They fight each other, somebody wins. There's also man versus society. This is why I like heist movies so much. It's usually people who are neglected by the system getting back at the system that's neglected them. And there's also man versus self. Typically, these focus on rites of passage. So again, a coming-of-age story, a midlife crisis movie, overcoming alcoholism, those sort of topics. There are also some other types of conflict which speak for themselves. There's man versus nature, man versus technology, and man versus supernatural. Fuck you, Dean. You know, man versus supernatural. That was a dumb joke. It's a dumb joke. Now, just because your story has one main conflict doesn't mean that it shouldn't have smaller conflicts along the way. Every scene should have some form of conflict, and every conversation should also have it. I'm going to talk more about conflict when we get to our second episode that's all about characters and establishing wants and needs that work against each other, so you constantly have friction between characters. Step 4 is all the abstract shit. Themes, motifs, and symbols, oh my. Motifs are a little bit tricky. I'm including an article in the description where you can learn more about motifs if you're interested. They explain it far better than I ever could. Motifs should be the extra layers that really take your movie to the next level, but if you deal with them too early in the process, you're going to get bogged down and it's going to come out convoluted. Themes are statements about something. So where a motif couldn't really offend anybody, a theme is a divisive statement. Where your motif may be something like love or morality, a theme is going to be a statement about that thing, like love is for suckers or morality is subjective. It's important to note this doesn't have to be what you personally believe. It just has to be what your movie believes and what you're setting out to prove through the narrative of your story. And one of the ways you can communicate that theme is through symbols. Symbols are objects within the world of your movie that represent something larger than themselves. One of the easiest ways to think about this is the cross. If you show the cross, most people automatically assume that means Christianity. But it's just a shape. So you can reinforce your theme by having a symbol that stands for something more than itself that is treated with a certain respect or a certain disrespect. Now, the abstract stuff here gets a little bit tricky if you don't really have a point of reference, so I decided it might be helpful to develop my own idea alongside you guys. So I wanted to come up with a movie that would blend my favorite genres, like the heist movie and the period piece, and I came up with a really fun premise. So my idea is a heist movie set in Victorian London that follows a group of circus freaks who steal the crown jewels. That's a fun movie. Tell me you wouldn't see that movie. I don't believe you. And if any of you steal this idea, I'm gonna know. And I'm coming for you. So let's apply all these concepts that we've talked about onto my project so you can see what that process looks like. My movie is very high concept. It's very plot driven about this group of, again, circus folk who steal the crown jewels. In the next episode, we're gonna develop some characters for this movie around the plot. Our conflict is very man versus society. Again, it's a group of disenfranchised people that are getting back at the society that has neglected them. And Victorian London is a perfect setting for that. My theme is that it is better to control your own fate for the worse than to let society control your fate for you. Again, that's not necessarily something I believe. I mean, maybe. I might believe that. And initially, there's a lot of symbols just kind of already embedded into this. The crown jewels themselves are sort of a symbol of wealth, of monarchy, of organization and rule. And to have a group of people fight the system by stealing that is very representative of them taking their fate in their own hands. You can also have multiple objects representing the same thing. I think if stealing the crown jewels is the end goal, then we should have some form of that a little bit earlier in the script. And one of the first things that pops out is the ringmaster's hat and baton. You have this person in control of the circus, in control of this motley crew of people, and if you have these items like the baton or the hat that represent that control that are burned or thrown away or misplaced, then that kind of sets the tone that will be continued further by stealing the crown jewels in the end. So again, those are two different objects symbolizing the same thing. All right, so let's move on to our final step of this video. It's going to be coming up with your elevator pitch. Now, the reason it's called an elevator pitch is because a lot of times people would find themselves stuck in an elevator with a famous director or producer and only had about 20 seconds to pitch themselves and pitch their movie to that producer. Regardless of whether or not you're ever actually stuck in an elevator with a celebrity who can make your dream project happen, it's still a good idea to know how to sell your movie in as few words as possible. One of the easiest ways to do that is to develop your log line. A log line is a 1 or 2 sentence summary with a hook to keep people invested. Let me give you some famous examples. I'll say the log line and then see if you can guess which movie I'm talking about. An 8-year-old troublemaker must protect his house from a pair of burglars when he is accidentally left home alone by his family on Christmas vacation. That's right, Breakfast at Tiffany's. An NYPD officer tries to save his wife and several others taken hostage by German terrorists during a Christmas party at the Nakatomi Plaza in Los Angeles. Another obvious one. And lastly, after a young man is murdered, his spirit stays behind to warn his lover of impending danger with the help of a reluctant psychic, Whoopi Goldberg. Okay, I may have added that last part in, but you get an idea. You're trying to succinctly wrap up what your movie is all about, give a lot of details about the things that make it unique, and make it catchy enough that people want to invest in your movie. The logline for my movie would be a group of anarchic circus freaks rebel against Victorian London society through a plot to steal the crown jewels. Again, it tells you certain qualities about the protagonists and the antagonists within the story and gives you an idea of what you can expect. Also, sometimes you will hear the blank meets blank formula when it comes to the elevator pitch. You're basically telling people what 2 movies would need to in order for your movie to be made as a baby. So I might pitch my movie as The Greatest Showman meets Snatch or Ocean's 11. There are some pros and cons with this. The pros is you get a very succinct idea of the tonal style you can expect out of the movie, but it also can be seen as derivative. If you want your product to be unique, something new that they've never seen before, then comparing it to 2 old projects might not be the best route for you. But in the case of a really fun, entertaining movie that isn't trying to break any new grounds like my movie, it works pretty well. Just a few more optional steps that really depend on the project that you're wanting to make before we close out this video. If you're dealing with a period piece like mine is, you'll want to do a lot of research on the way people spoke back then, the things they would wear, but you want to make sure that you've done enough research that you don't sound like you're talking out of your ass if you're choosing to deal with the topic you really don't know anything about. Also, if you're making a genre movie, like a Western or a heist movie, it's important to know the conventions of that genre so that you can know when to emulate them and when to go your own separate way. And that's it for this video. These are sort of your basic building block pieces to get the ball rolling. But we're already making really good time on creating your feature-length screenplay idea. I hope this video has been helpful. If there's something that I could be doing better or something that I forgot to mention that I should have thrown in, just let me know in the comments below. I want to make sure I'm doing right by you guys, especially if this is something you're using as a tool to help you along your creative journey. In episode 2, we're going to talk about how to develop and flesh out your characters, how to give them realistic quirks, how to give them wants and needs, and how they should interact with each other. Until then, stay creating, everybody. That was a really bad outro. We're going to keep trying these things until we get one that works. Peace!